I'll be talking about my hometown, Amsterdam, and about how that wishes to see itself and how it presents itself to the outside world, and how that affects my understanding of the city, my experience of that city, and also what room or what space that leaves, physical space, but also mental space for your own contribution to a city, because I agree that it's up to us to make a city together. So I am Michiel, and what you're seeing here, the I am is part of our city brand, Iamsterdam. We'll be talking about that at length. And I'm from this city. I mean, I could have shown you a map, but if you've been to Amsterdam, you already have that image in your head, and if you haven't been there, you don't know what you're looking at. So I thought, let's show this image, because it's messy. Amsterdam, it consists of all kinds of things. So it's a pile of old buildings, and so this is where my house is. It's actually next to this windmill that you see depicted there, and my office is somewhere there, and that's next to the Rijksmuseum. And I have this two-sided practice. So on the one hand, I'm running this research project called Field Architecture that we use to understand cities and failures, urban failures, or buildings that are stigmatized, or that are neglected or demolished, and we're curious to find out why that is, and if there are any alternatives to the demolition of them, for example. And on the other hand, I'm running this office called Nonfiction, which is more cheerful, which is more looking into the positive side of things, and which is very active. And we curate things, we organize things, we commission artists to make artworks, and every now and then we do things in public space. But since it's Amsterdam, with the weather we have over there, it's kind of problematic. But every now and then, and I have to say that with the global warming, we're greatly benefiting from it. So maybe in the future we will be this kind of city for public art projects in public space. So what I want to do today is first show you or share with you this analytical side, this critical side, giving you an overview of how city marketing in Amsterdam has impacted the city and public space. And then move on to that other side, the nonfiction side, and show you one project we did, which is kind of a reaction to the city marketing. And then I will come to some sort of conclusion, I hope. But first, my view on the city. This is my view on the city. This is sitting behind my desk. We have this amazing, spectacular office. We have this anti-squatting policy in Amsterdam. So this building is owned by the state, and we get to use it for next to nothing. And we've been there now for 3 years, and we're sitting on Museumplein, like the museum square of Amsterdam, where all the national museums are lined up. And this is literally my view. And this is on the day, I took this photo, that Obama came to town. So you have to imagine, it's quite a spectacle being there and being surrounded by all those buildings. And this is the kind of visitors it attracts. So this is, I took this photo, that's him. And there in the back, it's good already to point out, my talk will be mainly about this thing that's hidden down there somewhere, the Iamsterdam sign. So he went to see the newly reopened Rijksmuseum, which was nice, of course. But then this was what it took in order to protect him. So the whole area was fenced off. For a while, it was pretty uncertain if we would be allowed into our building that day. Luckily, we were, so I could take some of these photos. And then you had this enormous spectacle talking about art in public space. Nothing will beat this. Is there sound here? It's really ballet. And if you see those shipping containers, in case you missed them, so they piled up shipping containers, 3 rows of them, because behind it, it's the Van Gogh Museum, the Van Gogh Museum, and because of the resonance from the helicopters and to prevent the paintings from falling from the walls, they had to build this enormous structure there. So it really has become this playground or battleground almost. But of course, the aim of his visit, apart from the nuclear summit, but the fact that that was held in The Hague, but he had a day off, so he came to Amsterdam, was just to have this photo opportunity for the city. So what you see here is the helicopter landing, and then underneath it is the sign. It's Iamsterdam. It's a logo, and I will talk about it more. So this Frans van de Avert, I'm friends with him on Facebook. He knows that I'm sharing this with you now. He's the chief marketing officer of the city, and he was super proud that day. He was really the hero, and like all his friends, they kept on liking it, and he had like 300 likes. So he had succeeded. So what I want to talk about is this urban brandscape that has developed in Amsterdam. And I guess you're familiar with like city marketing. It's nothing new, but I think we've taken it to the next level. You also have your, is that like commonly known, or yeah, you're familiar with your, is that an L or V, or what does it represent? Does it have a deeper meaning? Oh, okay. Well, ours is Iamsterdam, ich bin ein Berliner. We are, yeah, so it's, yeah, this idea of making you believe that you can identify yourself with the city as a local resident, but of course also as a visitor. So we are all Amsterdam. And how that first came to town, quite straightforward, I'd say. They just drove it in and put it on the square. Who has been to Amsterdam and has witnessed this? Someone familiar with this? Yeah, people in front, okay. Then, this was, I think, 5 years ago. We were really like struck by lightning. This thing fell from the sky, and all of a sudden we had this enormous Iamsterdam logo in front of our National Museum on the main square. Which was, I was totally puzzled by it. I like it, I hate it, my daughter climbs on it, I kick it. It's this thing, you cannot avoid it, it's there. But it has become super popular, and I think it's one of like the main tourist attractions. Like overnight, we had this new icon. Well, of course you have these kinds of scenes now. So it's this picture-perfect ID, labeled or picture-perfect representation of the city with the newly renovated Rijksmuseum, which reopened just a few months ago, or last year actually. And then with this thing in front of it, just to make sure that you know that it's in Amsterdam and you're part of it. But then, so this is like the current situation. If you would go there now, you would be looking at this thing, and if you want to take a nice photo of the square or of the museum, for example, it will be in there. So they have assured that whatever you bring home, Iamsterdam will be in there somewhere. And probably myself as well, riding my bike. But what they're forgetting is the history of the place. So that's the first thing I want to emphasize, that we're really suffering from urban amnesia in Amsterdam, because it wasn't always as cheerful and as welcoming as it is today. The Museum Square was developed at the turn of the century, around 1900, and in the first few years it was actually used as a festival ground. So there were all kinds of big festivities and a world fair. So we had a world fair in 1888. And if you look at it, so my office would be somewhere where the circle is right now, but it wasn't built back then. But seen from afar, it looks innocent. But if you zoom in, you would have these scenes, like they were put putting indigenous tribes on display. You're probably familiar with these images, but I only heard about this last year, that this happened right in front of, like in the heart of our city. Nobody ever mentioned it, so let alone the city marketeers. There were all kinds of protests. The Nazis marched down this square. Nothing is referring to this episode, nothing at all. Like not a small sign or anything. This is literally, if I walk out of my office, there would be these bunkers there. Like the whole space was covered with bunkers. Nothing reminds of it. It was just a big mess for a while. It was just stuff happening without any clear guidance from the municipality. People were just doing things. There were lots of protests. It was an 8-lane highway. It was the quickest way to get out of the city. So the whole square was basically paved at one point. And people were doing drag races in the middle of the night, like going 150 kilometers an hour in the middle of the city. All kinds of protests against poverty, in favor of peace, against the nuclear bomb. But then, with the increase of wealth in the city and our prosperity, the municipality had enough tax money, and they wanted to redesign the square and make it a proper square. So this was the outcome of that, and this is the current design. If you go there now, you will probably recognize it. For those of you who haven't been there, this is the extension of the Van Gogh Museum, right there. You can buy diamonds over there. That's the Rijksmuseum. It looks as if maybe they're putting up the Iamsterdam logo when they took this photo, could be. This is the Stedelijk Museum, it's our national modern art museum. So we are here. This is the concert hall, the main concert hall of the city, and then this is super interesting. So this is the American consulate, we have nice neighbors. This is the Russian consulate. This is now Gazprom, and this is a Chinese investment bank. And they just moved in the last few years. Before that, the people were actually living also on the square, looking into the square. But it has changed dramatically. So with the redesign of the square, with the emphasis on tourism and events, things have changed, and not necessarily for the better. So, so this space is not really meant, because it just doesn't work as a square. It's just a leftover space, or that's how I experience it. But it works really well on one day a year, which is our, used to be Queen's Day, now it's King's Day. Luckily, I wasn't there this year, but this would be the view from our balcony. So, it's this kind of space now. It's an event space. And the topping of the cake was this, which happened last year with the reopening of the Rijksmuseum, which accidentally or not coincided with the closing down of this gem of a little cultural institution. So around the same time as all these major cultural venues reopened on Museum Square, in other parts of the city, smaller cultural institutions had to close down because of the funding cut. So you see this shift in the city from this plethora of smaller bottom-up initiatives. I mean, I'm not going to complain about Amsterdam. I think it's a wonderful city to live in. There's a lot of support for the arts and for young, rebellious people. But that is shifting, and I think we should be careful about it. And also learn from other cities. I know Barcelona is also going through the same kind of phase, I guess. So maybe there's something we can learn from each other, because we're throwing away a lot that we established in the last few decades. So with the closing down of these cultural venues, in came the merchandising. And I walked around yesterday here, and I think it's a lovely city you have here. And okay, it is being promoted, and I guess you're also maybe are a bit ambivalent about the scale of tourism, and maybe that has increased, but I'd say it's nothing compared to what we've experienced in Amsterdam. It's a total sellout. So you have an Amsterdam city card. The city is being exported, so you have all these trade fairs around the world, and they have these booths where they're selling the brand. Then they even have this label now, so if you walk through the city and you want to find a real genuine Amsterdam experience, then it has to have this label, otherwise it can't be good, right? And it has been fruitful. I mean, depending on how selective you are, you will find Amsterdam in all kinds of lists. It's doing well. So the people responsible for it's an enormous organization. It's called Amsterdam Marketing. So it has this chief marketing officer, and there are like dozens of people working there, and it keeps growing and growing on a fairly limited budget, actually. So this logo really accelerated their efforts. They really greatly benefited from it. So it has been a success from the perspective of generating more income, attracting more tourists, but not so much, I'd say, for the experience of the city, and not so much for people like me who are active and who want to engage with the city. Because it's like being translated into street furniture. So this is, I think, at the factory, they will be distributed around the city. Literally, again, overnight, all the billboards were changed into this poster. Like, wherever you went in the city, you would see this sign, and it was saying, welcome to the new year, the year where we will celebrate Amsterdam again. Entire buildings are like covered with enormous billboards that have Iamsterdam on it. And now this sign is also, it started traveling. They made some copies, so it might turn up here in Ljubljana. So they put it everywhere. So this is a new part of the city, a newly, also recently opened museum for film, cinema. This is at Schiphol, so just before you leave the country, just to make sure that it's really burned into your memory, they show you it one more time. And now it's literally going abroad. So this is in Boston. So they put it on a plane and has been traveling around the world. So Amsterdam, its topography is now slowly expanding and taking over new territories. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, but I think it kind of symbolizes a bigger trend in Amsterdam, which I labeled polishing and packaging. So there's no space anymore for like real rough things. Everything is being polished. Everything is commodified and packaged. So one example of that is this, I think, wonderful sculpture done by Thomas Hirschhorn back in 1999. Spinoza and Descartes, they lived in Amsterdam for a while because of its tolerant climate. So a lot of refugees back in the 17th and 18th century, they all moved to Amsterdam because you had freedom of press, freedom of expression. And in order to commemorate him, Thomas Hirschhorn, a Swiss artist, made this makeshift monument right in the red light district, where he, like with his hands, made some sort of statue of Spinoza. But more importantly, he had all his books there on display, so you could just, for free, consult the writings of Spinoza, and he would add his own comments. So it was a really rich monument. This was a temporary thing, and now we have a permanent monument. So we moved back in time 50 years, coming up with this bronze sculpture that will never leave, I'm afraid. And everyone was appalled. This is really not something that we and not only me and my friends, but like it was widely shared that this is not something that we would like to have on our streets. But again, it's part of a bigger development. If you look, for example, at the Canal district, one particular street, for example, the Berenstraat, the Bear Street, it's now branded as part of the 9 straatjes, so the 9 little streets. So there were just 9 streets, or maybe 10, but they figured, oh yeah, maybe if we package them and we label them with the 9 streets, then it will become something. And indeed, it became something. So this is what the street looked like in the 70s. I'm not celebrating rundown neighborhoods here or anything, but just to show you that this came from this kind of situation where like buildings were falling to pieces. It was actually saved, this part of, everyone fled the city. A lot of artists and activists, they moved in and they helped restore those buildings. And now it's completely taken over by global brands and chains. And so this is it's this pedestrian zone now. And they have this website, which is, it's only emphasizing the shops. So apparently there are no people living here anymore. A friend of mine yesterday told me that he heard this story that only the ground floor is occupied now, and then above that there's nothing, because they had to get rid of the stairs because they were taking up too much space. So in order to free up space, all the stairs are now gone, and now they have to think about how they can make those upper floors livable again by having stairs connected to them from other parts of the canals. I don't know if it's true. So this is like the map, everything is nice and cozy. And coming back to the museum square, you would see this kind of situation. This is the American consulate that we can see from our window. You would have these protests with, this is against the war in El Salvador in the 80s. This very explicit artistic language or cultural language. And then that is completely reappropriated now by commercial parties. This is to promote a book or a cartoon, comic book. Again, the crosses. And even the city, so in 2013 we had this year-long celebration of all kinds of things in the city. Well, I heard some people laughing, but this is actually a pretty tragic person, Bas-Jan Ader, a Dutch artist who went missing while he was sailing his boat in the 70s. Who made very emotional artworks, I dare to say. And here you see him driving into one of the canals. I don't know exactly what the meaning was, but I don't think he intended that 40 years after his death, the city marketing department of Amsterdam would use it on the cover of their promotion guide for that year. This is another famous work by him. I'm too sad to tell you, just imagine that they would have branded this. So they would have never done that. So they have this very selective way of looking at art and at culture. They just pick the things that fit nicely into their self-image. And to make it even more dramatic, the policing. So this is literally in front, again, of our building. This is a police booth. It's really insane. The good thing about it is you can leave your bike unlocked, always, no problem, won't be stolen. Then this thing is standing there, of course, because of the American consulate, which has this nice new fence around it. Then if you walk a few meters further, then you will encounter this sign that you cannot drink alcohol and referring to some sort of law. And I really like that only small, tiny little interventions are still visible. So the Van Gogh is expanding, and they put up these signs. And someone sprayed glasses on that thing, but nobody dares to be more explicit than that. Because there's really no way to escape it, the system. And they even try to occupy it. This is not staged or anything. They literally, they had their Occupy Amsterdam happening next to the stock exchange. And they figured, no, we should go to our national square because we want to make a statement. And while they were moving there with just 5 tents, they were kicked out again. And this is done by a friend of mine for another part of the city, Dam, like our main square. And here you can see all the CCTV cameras and their angle, so the area they're covering. And as you can see, everything that's blue is covered by a camera. And he, super detailed, he's pointing out where they are, in which direction they're pointing. So he's basically saying there's no way to escape. You're constantly being recorded, except for our national monument. If you climb up on a national monument, you won't be watched. So maybe that's the solution. This is as a result of that, because I don't dare to say I'm the representative of anything at all, but there are more people like me who are disturbed by this whole development, which was actually kickstarted by the government. I mean, everybody jumped on that train, but it was the municipality who started it. So there are all kinds of initiatives that are going against it or are trying to stir up a discussion. For example, Iamsterdam. I as in I, oh my God, what's happening to Amsterdam? And they weren't allowed to use Iamsterdam. The judge ruled that they had to change it, so they added the heart, and now it's like this mix of Iamsterdam, I love New York, but then it tries to be critical of it. So it's a bit confusing. So that's the analytical part. That's the situation how it is. It's a bit one-sided, I have to say, but I will come back to that later. Now, how we deal with it. So how we try to reconquer the city. How do we how we try to inject ourselves into this system that has been imposed on our city. We do tiny little things. For example, we raise the flag. We've been raising flags on our balcony, which sits on, like, you have the American flag, you have the Russian flag, you have Iamsterdam, and then we're doing these little exhibitions, and we're raising a flag which just says the name and shows an image of the artist that we're showing there, just to point out that there are actually human beings present there in that space, and that they also deserve attention. We've been working with the Stedelijk Museum, which is across the square from us, doing all exhibitions and events. And we always try to break through the walls of that museum. So in this case, for example, we parked this pimped out car in front of the museum. And if you want to have a permit to do that, it will take you like 4 months, because because you're actually organizing an event from their perspective. So instead, we said, no, we just need a park it permit for 1 day. And then so like overnight, they gave us the permit and we could park cars. So it's like making massive sound, like the whole back is filled with this sound system. It was really like saying to the city, hello, here we are. The city belongs to all of us, and we're occupying this pavement here. And like a lot of neighbors came by and they enjoyed it, and we drank coffee together. But it was this one old lady who came down with her iPhone, like in her 80s. She had this, she could measure the decibel, like the sound levels, and she was like, guys, it's too loud. So then we lowered the volume. We've been doing some projections on facades in the city. So it's all very playful. It's more of a joke or tongue-in-cheek kind of message that we're trying to bring across. But then we figured, yeah, these things are nice, but it stays within this small artistic circle. We really want to have an impact, and it shouldn't be isolated cases. It should be like a real plan to counter the other plan. So in the last 2 years, we've been working on this thing called Tercer, which is the project that I wanted to share with you. Tercer means in-between spaces. So like these alleys that you see here, you probably also have them here in Ljubljana. And they're quite particular, and they're all in one specific area, namely the blue part you see here on the map, which is the Canal district. You know, it's, I guess we're famous for it, or at least Unesco put the Canal district on their World Heritage list. So that's the blue part is the UNESCO World Heritage area we have in Amsterdam. And that happened around the same time when we arrived on Museum Square. We saw UNESCO coming in, and we wondered, okay, what is this? What will that mean for the city? Is this some sort of Trojan horse that will bring in all kinds of restrictions and new laws? We didn't know how to deal with it. So we started looking for our own space. We wanted to carve out our own space in this new thing that we were confronted with. So what we did was we used this map of UNESCO World Heritage, And we studied it carefully. So we really, like, literally had a map of it. We zoomed in. We were looking for ways how to circumvent this new system. And we didn't so much focus on the canals because they're like overprotected. You cannot do anything anymore ever. So even if you want to just add one screw, it's impossible. You have to go through this process. It will take you 2 years. So we shifted our attention away from the main canals, away from the facades, into the back alleys. And we documented them, so we mapped them. So what you see here is an overview of all the spaces that we found in this one particular area. And these are their silhouettes, so the outlines of these spaces. And as you can see, most of them are just straight lines, they're just basic alleys. But some of them are like really complex, almost like ecosystems or parallel universes. So this one, for example, that one, multiple alleys and then courtyard kind of spaces. And before that, they were completely unknown to us because if you walk around, you don't see them. They're not supposed to be there, actually. But if you go back in art history, you will find depictions of the same canals while they were being constructed, and you can see that these buildings were not like done as a whole. They're actually individual buildings, and they always had these alleys in between them because, as you can see on this famous Vermeer painting, which was actually it's in Delft, but it's the same system or the same urban fabric there. It was where the maid would live, or that will give her access to the backside of the house where she would have her living quarters. So these alleys were always part of the morphology of the city. So after looking at the map and discovering those alleys, we went walking down the canals, and well, we found them. And all of them, without an exception, they were closed off. So back in the days, they were all open, freely accessible. Some would even lead from one canal to the other, but now they're all fenced off. So they're privatized, even though they used to be public space. So we tried to understand what was hidden behind those doors. And then we also remembered that we have this history in Amsterdam of reoccupying in-between spaces. This is Aldo van Eyck, and after the war there were lots of buildings that weren't bombed, but they were just deteriorated, so they had to be knocked down. And from the rubble he created these playgrounds for children. So we use that as some sort of reference also for our own intervention. So what we did, and I'm going to show you some examples, and this is an ongoing thing, and this is also an open invitation to you if you have an idea how to reactivate those alleys in Amsterdam, or if you want to borrow our concept, or maybe you're working on similar things here in Ljubljana, let me know. Jarek Auberg, I initiated the project with him. He's an architect. He thought of these alleys as pockets of tranquility. So he created a silence chapel. So in one of the alleys, he made this, curtain, or a row of curtains, and you have to push them aside, and then you can creep into this space, and then all of a sudden you're surrounded by this beautiful fabric, which is actually it's camouflage stuff used by the US Navy to cover up tanks when they're moving them across the globe. So I thought it was ironical. Anyway, you can walk in. This was during the opening. He also replaced the door, so there used to be this green door. It wasn't prescribed. For some reason, everybody started using the same door. And Jarek was like, why? Maybe we can have, with perforations, this white door. Maybe it will improve the quality of the building. So if you walked in, if you would look up, this is what you would see. They would be dancing in the wind. It was just a beautiful, relaxing experience. People spent hours there, so it really became this pocket park almost in the city where you could just escape the vibrant street life on the canals and the surrounding streets and be alone for a while. So that was the first one, and then we did more of them. So this is Monica Tormel, Swedish artist, who we invited to work with a courtyard, and she thought as a nice gesture and as a starting point for a bigger exploration of the potential of that site, she made a wishing well. There you see it. Or it's like a wormhole. It's like a secret tunnel that will take you to China or something. And she filled it up with water, and we were touring people around. We had 5,000 visitors in a period of 1 month. So it was the first time we got the key, so we negotiated with the owners. We didn't talk to the municipality about this. We didn't ask for permission. We just knocked on the door, rang the doorbell. We asked, would we be allowed to use your alley for a period? And most of them just shut the door, but some luckily liked it. And so, for example, this is what you would see. We also work with sound artists. This is Rutger Zuiderveld. This is how we found his alley. It's next to a hospital. It was actually where the dead people were carried away from the hospital to the morgue. So it had this very powerful aura to it. And he made this very subtle sound piece where like the sounds around you would blend with the sounds that he created there on site. So it really became this ritual space. Then one of the alleys was literally hidden behind the whole building. So you can see, and we turned it into a tiny event space. So Christian Bakker made this construction with umbrellas. So when it started raining, you could take one umbrella. We had a beamer installed, and we did all kinds of lectures reflecting on this phenomenon of in-between space, both in a physical way, like actual space, but also for us it's very much about this, right? About mental space, finding new space in the city to really inject yourself. And we did these film screenings there. Hopefully, it's difficult to see, but like, yeah, it really twists the whole. It adds new dimensions almost to the space. Another artwork. I'm almost there. This was interesting. We were approached by a young theater maker, Celine Talens. Her parents were one of those artists who moved back into the city in the 70s and squatted one of those buildings, and she wanted to reenact that that gesture. And so what she did, she talked to her parents, and I said, how did you dress up, and et cetera, and she invited people like just members of the audience to join her. So they went parading down the canal, holding up these banners, asking for rights, etc. And they, without announcing themselves, they literally broke into this one alley and they occupied it for a very short period. So these are some of our attempts to deal with this massive like structure or system that is applied in Amsterdam now, which has generated a lot of income for the city. A lot of new jobs were created by it. The museums are greatly benefiting from it. But I'm still in doubt if it's what it is. Is it something for all of us or not? But the irony is that, and I wish I had this clear-cut story about it, but I'm way more ambivalent than you are, because our project was made possible by it. So it was partly funded by it. So it should have looked something like this. So that's the great irony, is that it's really a monster and has swallowed everything. And it, you know, probably Pinocchio in the belly of the whale with Geppetto. We sometimes really feel like we're stuck in the belly of the whale. There's no way out. We're all in the whale now. And it's really hard in Amsterdam with the, I mean, it's a super expensive city. It's really hard to sustain yourself there. So if you want to be creative, if you want to be provocative, You have to join them. It feels sometimes that there's really no way around it anymore. I know people who are moving to Berlin, moving to Rotterdam, but if you want to stay active in Amsterdam, and if you want to raise your voice, you have to deal with it one way or the other. So is it totally black and white? Are they wrong and we are right? I don't think so. I think it's more complicated than that. And so I want to end on a happy note, show you some nice images, good things that came out of it, but it's more of a question to all of us, and also to open up the debate. Should we only counter the system, or should we collaborate with the system? Can we help shape the system? Well, these kind of questions. Because, for example, the square not only showed indigenous tribes, but there were also these ice skating scenes there. And because of Iamsterdam, it was reintroduced a few years ago. So I went skating there. It's actually an amazing experience to be skating there on that square. And what is also good to know is the advertising agency who designed Iamsterdam is also the ad agency who did this campaign for this hostel we have in Amsterdam. So this is where the guy checks in, and this is when he checks out. Hopefully you get the point. Yeah. Amsterdam is full of excitement. So they are very humorous, and this is another poster campaign they did. So I also try to look at this Iamsterdam thing as something that might not be so serious. Maybe we should treat it in a more playful way. Maybe we can twist it. Maybe we can adjust it. I'm not sure. Maybe that was the intention also of this ad agency, that it's not this monolithic thing that is thrown at you, but maybe it's something that you can help, that it becomes more rooted in the local situation. So more happy images of the great things that are happening on the square, all being watched over by Iamsterdam. And maybe to end with this nice photo collage someone made, so it also inspires people, and maybe it will even inspire you. Maybe you can have your own Ljubljana. Thank you.